When Millionaire CEO Benjamin Whitman stumbles across a lost little boy in a bustling mall, he has no idea his entire life is about to change. The boy, clutching a worn stuffed toy, calls him Daddy, and the woman rushing to claim him is the one Benjamin never forgot, Nicole Evans, the love he lost years ago. Torn between the demands of his empire and the sudden discovery of the family he never knew he had, Benjamin must fight harder than ever, not for power or prestige, but for the hearts that could finally make him whole. In a whirlwind of second chances, hidden truths, and the magic of the Christmas season, Benjamin and Nicole must learn to trust each other again before the world tears them apart once more. Love found them once. Will fate let them keep it? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love hearing from you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt romance, one life at a time. The Christmas air was crisp with the scent of roasted chestnuts and fresh fir trees, wrapping the crowded mall in the illusion of holiday magic. Shoppers hurried past, arms burdened with glossy designer bags, voices blending into a hum of carols and last-minute bargains. Benjamin Whitman, clad in a sharp, tailored coat and leather gloves, browsed half-heartedly through a luxury shoe boutique. He was here out of obligation. Another client dinner, another round of deals to close before the new year rolled in. But his mind was elsewhere, tangled in deadlines and loneliness he refused to name. A sharp, thin cry pierced the ambient buzz. Benjamin turned instinctively. A little boy, no older than 4, stumbled into view. He wore a bright yellow t-shirt under an oversized winter jacket, clutching a worn stuffed bunny in one hand. Tears streaked his round cheeks, his lip trembling as he scanned the towering sea of strangers around him. Benjamin's heart, so often armored against the world, squeezed painfully. Without thinking, he knelt down to the boy's level. "Hey, buddy," he said, voice low and gentle. "Are you lost?" The boy hiccuped, nodding miserably. His small fingers twisted into the ear of his stuffed toy. For a moment, he looked up at Benjamin with wide, trusting eyes, the same shade of deep blue Benjamin saw in his own reflection every morning. An odd, unsettling recognition prickled beneath his skin. "Okay," Benjamin said, offering a hand. "We'll find your mom, all right? You're safe now." The boy hesitated, then placed his tiny hand into Benjamin's gloved palm. Security guards were already circling, walkie-talkies crackling, but Benjamin barely noticed. He lifted the boy into his arms, steady and careful, as though the child were made of glass. And strangely, it felt right. Natural. A commotion near the entrance snapped his attention. A woman was pushing through the crowd, her face pale with panic, her brown hair tumbling from a loose ponytail. Her eyes locked onto the boy, and then onto Benjamin, and she froze mid-step. "Mommy!" the boy cried, wriggling excitedly in Benjamin's arms. The woman, Nicole, rushed forward. Benjamin's breath caught hard in his chest. Nicole Evans. The past crashed over him like a wave he hadn't seen coming. Memories of warm summer nights, stolen kisses, whispered dreams. The woman he had loved and lost stood before him, looking exactly as she had in his dreams, and nothing like he remembered at the same time. Nicole scooped the boy into her arms, hugging him tightly. Her hands trembled. I'm so sorry," she gasped, looking up at Benjamin with wary, haunted eyes. "Thank you for helping him." Benjamin could barely form words. His voice was thick, the question bursting out before he could stop it. "Nicole, is he?" Before he could finish, the boy, still clinging to her shoulder, turned, grinned wide, and blurted out the word that shattered everything. "Daddy!" Time stopped. The world, the holiday lights, the crowds, the noise, fell away into a vast, stunned silence. Benjamin staggered back a step, every piece of him unraveling. Nicole's face crumpled, and in her eyes he saw the truth. Raw, unspoken, irrevocable. The boy wasn't just a lost child, he was Benjamin's son. Nicole tightened her hold on Seth, as if she could shield him from the weight of Benjamin's stare. Her pulse hammered against her ribs, every instinct screaming at her to run. But it was too late. Benjamin knew. He moved slowly, carefully, as though approaching a wild animal. His voice, when he spoke again, was hoarse with disbelief. "Nicole, he's mine, isn't he?" The mall spun in dizzying colors around her. She nodded, a small broken motion, her throat too tight to form words. For a beat, Benjamin just stood there, the air between them charged with too many emotions to name: anger, betrayal, awe, heartbreak. Then his gaze dropped to Seth, who was babbling softly to his stuffed bunny, oblivious to the earth-shaking truths unraveling around him. Benjamin's hand clenched into a fist at his side before he forced it to relax. His voice, when it came again, was rougher, but steadier. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nicole swallowed hard. She wanted to tell him the truth. That fear had gripped her, that she had convinced herself she was protecting Seth from the chaos of Benjamin's world, the media, the constant scrutiny, the ruthless business wars that had already swallowed so much of the man she once loved. But standing here, with Benjamin's raw pain laid bare, none of her reasons felt strong enough. "I thought," she faltered, tightening her arms around Seth, "I thought it was better this way, safer for him, for both of us." Benjamin stepped closer, rain from his coat dripping onto the polished marble floor. The lines of his jaw were sharp, unforgiving. "You don't get to make that decision alone," he said quietly, an edge of steel beneath the sadness. "You should have told me, Nicole." Seth tugged at her sleeve, his big blue eyes wide. "Mommy, are you mad at Daddy?" Her heart broke a little more at the innocence in his voice. Nicole forced a smile, brushing Seth's hair back gently. "No, sweetheart," she whispered. "No one's mad." But that was a lie. Anger simmered in Benjamin. She could see it barely contained beneath his careful exterior. Anger. And something else. A desperate, aching hunger to know his son. Benjamin crouched to Seth's eye level, his expression softening in a way that made Nicole's chest ache. "Hey, buddy," he said. I'm your dad. I didn't know, but I'm really happy to meet you." Seth smiled, shy and pleased, like he'd been waiting for this all along. He reached out and touched Benjamin's hand with his small fingers, trusting and sure. Nicole blinked back tears. Benjamin looked up at her, an unspoken plea in his gaze. "Let's talk," he said, standing. "Somewhere private, please." Nicole hesitated. Every instinct told her to flee, to preserve the fragile world she'd built for herself and Seth. But deep down, she knew she owed Benjamin more than a hurried explanation in the middle of a shopping mall. She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "There's a cafe across the street. It's quiet. We can go there." Benjamin gave a short nod, his throat working. Nicole adjusted Seth on her hip, clutching him like a lifeline, and together the three of them slipped out of the mall and into the brisk winter evening. The snow had started to fall again, soft and steady, dusting the city in white. For the first time in years, Benjamin Whitman felt like maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he was meant to be. The cafe was tucked away on a quiet side street, its windows glowing warmly against the gray dusk. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and fresh-baked bread, a world away from the glittering chaos of the mall. Nicole found a corner booth, settling Seth between her and the wall. He immediately pulled out crayons from her bag and began coloring on a paper placemat, blissfully unaware of the tension thickening the space around him. Benjamin slid into the seat across from them, his hands folded tightly on the table. His normally polished, impenetrable exterior had cracked, and Nicole could see the man she remembered underneath, the boy she had loved when dreams still felt possible. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Benjamin leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "Tell me everything." Nicole stared down at her hands, twisting the hem of her sweater. She hadn't meant for it to happen like this. She had imagined, once, a different life. A life where she hadn't been so afraid, where Benjamin had been by her side from the beginning. "I found out I was pregnant a few weeks after you left for New York," she said, barely above a whisper. "You were starting Whitman Enterprises. You were under so much pressure already." She hesitated, the memory sharp and painful. "Your father made it clear there was no room for distractions, no room for me." Benjamin's jaw tightened, a muscle flickering in his cheek. "You should have told me anyway," he said, voice thick. "I would have come back. I would have..." He broke off, scrubbing a hand through his hair. Nicole's heart squeezed painfully. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared you'd feel trapped. Scared your father would find a way and make it even worse. He hated me, Benjamin. He made sure I knew it." Benjamin looked at her, something deep and wounded in his eyes. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know he went that far." Nicole gave a small, brittle laugh. "You were chasing your dreams. I didn't want to be the one to pull you down." Benjamin shook his head slowly, as if trying to shake off a burden too heavy to carry. You weren't a burden, he said fiercely. You were everything good in my life, Nicole. And now, he glanced at Seth, whose tongue poked out in concentration as he colored a lopsided Christmas tree. Now I missed everything. Nicole's throat closed up. She hadn't let herself think about it too often, what Benjamin had missed. First steps, first words, the way Seth's laugh could light up a room. Regret flickered across Benjamin's face like a shadow. I want to be part of his life, he said, his voice rough. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what anyone says. I won't walk away from him. Nicole met his gaze, searching for the boy she had loved and finding a man even stronger than she remembered. You think it's that simple? She asked, not unkindly. He's never known anyone but me. He needs stability, Benjamin. He needs to feel safe. Benjamin nodded slowly, a grim determination settling over him. Then I'll prove to both of you that I'm staying, however long it takes. Nicole looked away, blinking hard against the sting in her eyes. She wanted to believe him. Part of her even ached to. But life had taught her the hard way. Promises were easy to make, much harder to keep. Across the booth, Benjamin watched her with a steady, unwavering intensity. For the first time in a long while, Nicole wondered if maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The cafe had emptied out as the evening deepened, leaving only a few lingering customers sipping coffee in companionable silence. Snow dusted the sidewalks outside, and the world felt muffled, quieter somehow, as if giving them a fragile pocket of time they didn't deserve, but desperately needed. Nicole watched Seth scribble happily, his cheeks pink with the excitement of the day. She shifted in her seat, nerves twisting in her stomach. Benjamin hadn't taken his eyes off them, not in a threatening way, but with a kind of reverence, as if he was trying to memorize everything at once, afraid it might slip through his fingers if he looked away. Nicole drew in a slow breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze. You deserve to know more, she said softly. But not here, not in front of Seth. Benjamin nodded, understanding without her needing to explain. Where? Nicole hesitated, weighing her options. She didn't want to bring him into her tiny apartment yet. That space had been her sanctuary, Seth's safe harbor from a world too big and too complicated. There's a park nearby, she said. It's quiet at night. Benjamin rose immediately, sliding on his coat. His movements were precise, but there was a certain rawness about him now, edges that no amount of money or polish could hide. She bundled Seth up in his jacket and hat, grateful when the boy yawned dramatically. It was well past his bedtime. I'll carry him, Benjamin offered, his voice gentler than she remembered it ever being. Nicole hesitated, then nodded. Seth reached for Benjamin without fear, nestling into the crook of his shoulder as if he belonged there. The sight struck something deep and aching inside her, a glimpse of a life she had once dared to dream about. They walked in silence, boots crunching softly over the thin layer of snow. The park was a small green space tucked between towering buildings, its benches dusted white, its trees strung with delicate fairy lights left over from a community festival. Nicole led them to a bench beneath a bare oak tree, its branches arching protectively overhead. Benjamin sat down carefully, still cradling Seth, who had fallen into a deep, trusting sleep against his chest. Nicole folded her arms, steeling herself. I didn't plan to keep him from you, she began quietly. At first, I told myself I would find the right time, the right way, but life kept moving, and then I got scared. Benjamin's hand moved instinctively over Seth's small back, steady and protective. He listened, his whole body tense, but he didn't interrupt. My parents weren't much help, she continued, a bitter smile ghosting her lips. And your father. She looked away. He made it clear I was never going to be good enough for you. I thought if I told you, he would use it. Use Seth to control you. Benjamin's jaw tightened. You're not wrong about my father, he said, voice hard. But you were wrong about me. Nicole's throat thickened. I know that now, she whispered. But back then I was 24, broke, pregnant, and terrified. I chose what I thought was the lesser heartbreak. Benjamin shifted slightly, careful not to jostle Seth. I would have chosen you, he said, fierce and low. Every time. No matter what. The certainty in his voice wrapped around her like a blanket she hadn't realized she missed. Nicole blinked rapidly against the sudden sting in her eyes. Maybe, she said, but we can't go back. We can only move forward, for Seth. Benjamin nodded, his expression unreadable. I don't expect you to trust me overnight, he said, but I'm not going anywhere. I want to be a father to him. And me? Nicole asked before she could stop herself, the words slipping out on a breath. What about me? Benjamin's gaze sharpened, something fierce and hungry flashing across his face. I want to be whatever you'll let me be, he said simply. For a long moment, the only sounds were the distant hush of tires over snow and the soft, even breathing of the boy sleeping between them. Nicole looked down at Seth, at Benjamin, at the impossible tangle of past and present sitting so close she could feel it breathing. Maybe it wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about building something new, something stronger on top of it. She wasn't ready to open the gates all at once, but for the first time, she realized she might be ready to find the key. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Nicole's modest apartment, casting soft gold across the worn hardwood floors. Seth sat cross-legged on the living room rug, building a lopsided tower out of colorful blocks, completely absorbed in his creation. Across the room, Benjamin perched awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, a paper cup of coffee cooling in his hand. Nicole watched him from the kitchen doorway, unsure who looked more out of place, Benjamin in his $1,000 wool coat, among her mismatched furniture, or herself, trying to pretend she wasn't hyper-aware of every breath he took. It had been a long night. After their conversation at the park, after tentative promises and heavier silences, Nicole had agreed to let Benjamin visit this morning. Just a visit, she had told herself, a first step, nothing more. And yet, seeing him now, his dark head bent slightly as he watched Seth with an expression of wonder. Something loosened painfully inside her. You're good with him, Nicole said quietly, breaking the fragile silence. Benjamin looked up, startled as if he hadn't realized she was watching. His lips curved in a faint, almost shy smile. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted, glancing back at Seth, but it feels natural. Nicole leaned against the doorway, arms folded, her heart heavy and light all at once. He's easy to love, she murmured. Benjamin's smile faltered slightly. Like his mother, heat rushed up Nicole's neck. She looked away, pretending to fuss with a dish towel. She wasn't ready for that, for the way his words made old feelings flicker dangerously to life. Seth's tower wobbled and collapsed in a clatter of plastic. He let out a small, frustrated grunt, and Benjamin was on the floor beside him in 2 strides, crouching low. Hey, Benjamin said, his voice patient. You almost had it, champ. Want me to help? Seth nodded solemnly, his little brow furrowed in concentration. Together they rebuilt the tower, Benjamin following Seth's enthusiastic instructions, no sign of frustration or impatience in his careful hands. Nicole watched them, a lump forming in her throat. It should have been this way all along, she thought. Seth should have known his father's hands, his laugh, his quiet encouragement. A pang of guilt twisted inside her, but Benjamin caught her eye over Seth's head, and in his gaze, she didn't see blame. Only fierce determination and a glimmer of something deeper. Forgiveness. Nicole, he said as Seth triumphantly topped the tower with a red block, I want to be here. Not just today. I want to be in his life. Every day. Nicole bit her lip. It's not that simple, Benjamin. We can't just snap our fingers and pretend the last 4 years didn't happen. I know, he said. His voice was steady. But we can start. One day at a time. One tower at a time. She gave a shaky laugh despite herself. Seth beamed up at both of them, blissfully unaware of the delicate negotiations happening around him. Again, Daddy? He asked, already knocking the tower down with a delighted squeal. Nicole froze. Benjamin smiled slowly as if savoring the word, the sound of it filling some hollow space inside him. Yeah, buddy, he said, ruffling Seth's hair. Again? Nicole pressed a hand to her heart, feeling it beat against her ribs, steady and strong. Maybe trust wasn't built in grand declarations or sweeping gestures. Maybe it started small. Maybe it started right here on a living room floor, rebuilding something broken, 1 block at a time. The next few days settled into a rhythm that was almost frightening in how right it felt. Benjamin would stop by after his morning meetings, often bringing coffee for Nicole and a new book or puzzle for Seth. They played in the small park around the corner, and Getty strolled past the holiday markets wrapped in scarves and laughter, and even managed a peaceful afternoon at the Children's Museum. Each day, Nicole found herself lowering the walls she had so painstakingly built. Each day, Seth's bond with Benjamin deepened, natural and unforced, as if he had been waiting for this all along. It was dangerous, how easy it was to fall into hope again. And danger, Nicole knew too well, had a way of finding you when you least expected it. They had just finished a late lunch at a tiny bistro near her apartment when it happened. Benjamin slung Seth onto his shoulders, the little boy giggling and waving his arms like a conductor as they crossed the street toward the bookstore Nicole loved. Nicole laughed, snapping a quick photo on her phone, heartful in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. That was when she saw him. A man loitering near a delivery van, his camera half concealed beneath his jacket. His posture, his furtive glances, everything about him screamed paparazzi. Nicole's blood turned to ice. "Benjamin," she hissed under her breath, "we have a problem." Benjamin followed her gaze in an instant, his body shifting subtly into something more alert, protective. "Get inside," he said tightly, nodding toward the bookstore. "Now." Nicole didn't argue. She grabbed Seth from his shoulders and practically sprinted the last few steps, the cozy bell over the bookstore door jangling wildly. Inside, the scent of old paper and pine garland filled the air. Kara, Nicole's best friend and the store's manager, looked up from the register in surprise. "Kara," Nicole gasped. "Someone's following us. Paparazzi, I think." Kara's eyes narrowed. "Get in the back. Now." Nicole hurried Seth into the staff room, her heart hammering against her ribs. Benjamin was right behind her, his presence a solid wall against the rising panic. Inside the small, cluttered room, Nicole paced, trying to calm her racing thoughts. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said, her voice shaking. "The second anyone finds out—" Benjamin stepped closer, his hands coming up in a calming gesture. "We'll handle it," he said firmly. "I'll handle it." Nicole shook her head. "It's not just you, Benjamin. It's Seth. It's me. Our lives aren't built for headlines and cameras flashing at every corner." Benjamin's expression softened, though the tension in his jaw didn't ease. "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry. I should have thought about this sooner." Nicole turned away, blinking fast. She had fought so hard to build a stable, quiet life for her son. Now it felt like sand slipping through her fingers. Seth tugged at her sleeve, his voice small. "Mommy, did I do something wrong?" Her heart cracked. She dropped to her knees and hugged him fiercely. "No, baby, you did nothing wrong." Benjamin knelt beside them, his hand resting lightly on Seth's back. "I promise," he said, his voice low and steady. "We're going to keep you safe, no matter what." Nicole looked at him, searching for any hint of false promises, any trace of arrogance. But there was only sincerity in his eyes. Fierce, unyielding. The same boy who had once chased dreams with her under the stars, now a man willing to fight for her and their son. Nicole drew in a shaky breath. "Okay," she whispered, "but we do this on my terms. Seth comes first. Always." Benjamin nodded, solemn. "Always," he echoed. Outside, she could already hear the telltale murmur of more cameras, more voices gathering. Their quiet little world had been breached. There was no going back now. But maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward. Together. The soft patter of rain tapped against the windows, blurring the streetlights into hazy gold halos. Inside Nicole's apartment, the world felt smaller, quieter, though her heart raced too fast for comfort. Seth had fallen asleep early, exhausted from the day's excitement and the lingering tension they all tried so hard to shield him from. His small form curled under a blanket on the sofa, breathing evenly. Nicole stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the rain. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and uncertain. Behind her, Benjamin moved quietly through the kitchen, cleaning up their leftover dinner without being asked. He belonged here too easily, too naturally. It scared her more than the paparazzi outside, because if she let herself believe in this too much, if she let herself hope, what would happen when it all fell apart? "You're thinking too loud," Benjamin said softly, setting a plate in the drying rack. Nicole gave a small, humorless laugh. "I guess I'm out of practice." He crossed the small space between them, not crowding her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he said. "Not with me." The words twisted painfully in her chest. "I spent years learning how to stand on my own," she murmured. "It's not easy to just let someone in again." Benjamin nodded, his expression serious. He leaned against the wall, giving her space, even as everything about him radiated steady patience. I'm not asking you to forget, he said. I'm asking you to trust that I'm here now, that I'm not running. Nicole swallowed hard, blinking back sudden tears. What if it's not enough, she whispered. What if trying isn't enough and Seth gets hurt in the crossfire? Benjamin's eyes darkened with something deeper than anger, something like grief. Then we keep trying, he said. We fight for him, for us, for whatever this could be. Nicole pressed her forehead against the cold glass, letting the silence stretch between them. Outside, somewhere beyond the rain, cameras still lurked, eager to turn their lives into headlines. The real world hadn't gone away. It was waiting, ruthless and unkind. But here, inside these walls, Benjamin wasn't the cold, calculating CEO. He was just a man willing to stand beside her, even if he had to do it one cautious step at a time. Nicole turned from the window slowly. Her voice shook when she spoke, but she made herself meet his eyes. I want to believe you, she said. Benjamin didn't move closer. He just held her gaze, steady and sure. Then let's start there, he said quietly, one small belief at a time. Nicole exhaled a slow, aching breath. Maybe she didn't have to hand him all of her heart tonight. Maybe it was enough, for now, to offer him the first fragile piece of it. She crossed the room, brushing past him to sit on the arm of the couch, her hand resting lightly on Seth's sleeping back. Benjamin lowered himself onto the opposite end, careful not to disturb the boy between them. And together, they sat in silence, two people tangled in the past but daring just a little to imagine a future. The rain had eased to a gentle drizzle by the time Benjamin spoke again, his voice low and rough around the edges. I wasn't just busy with work back then, he said, his eyes fixed on the window, not her. It's not an excuse, but it's the truth. Nicole sat very still, one hand resting lightly on Seth's small back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Benjamin leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his fingers threading together tightly. When I left for New York, I thought I was doing the right thing, building a future for us. He gave a bitter, humorless chuckle. I told myself that if I worked hard enough, succeeded fast enough, I could come back and finally be worthy of you. Nicole's heart twisted painfully. She hadn't known, hadn't guessed how much of his leaving had been about them, not about leaving her behind, but trying to build something bigger for her. You were already enough, she said quietly. Benjamin looked at her then, and the rawness in his gaze almost unraveled her completely. I didn't believe that, he said simply. I let my father get into my head. I let the pressure get to me. I let fear win. Nicole swallowed hard. Fear had ruled her too. It had been the silent hand that shaped both of their choices, pulling them apart when all they had ever wanted was to stay together. Benjamin dragged a hand through his hair, his frustration clear. And when I didn't hear from you, he stopped, his throat working. I thought you moved on. I thought you realized you deserved better. Nicole closed her eyes briefly. If only he had known the truth. If only she had reached out instead of hiding away with her broken heart. So I buried myself in work, Benjamin continued. Deals, expansions, mergers. I told myself if I was busy enough, rich enough, powerful enough, none of it would matter. He shook his head slowly, a small, broken laugh escaping him. But it didn't work. Every success felt hollow. Every year, every deal, none of it mattered because you weren't there. Nicole pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the sharp ache of regret settle deeper. You never moved on? She whispered. Benjamin met her eyes, and the honesty there was staggering. There was no one else, he said. Not really. No one I could see a future with, because the future I wanted walked away with you. The words hung between them, heavy and aching. Nicole turned her face away, struggling to steady her breathing. She wasn't sure what she had expected, that he had forgotten her, that he had replaced her with the glittering, disposable attachments of his world. Instead, here he was, telling her he had been just as lost, just as broken as she had been. Benjamin reached across the space between them, his hand hovering near hers, but not quite touching. I'm not the same man I was back then, he said softly, and I know you're not the same woman. We can't go back. But I would spend every day trying to be the man you and Seth deserve, if you let me. Nicole stared down at Seth's peaceful face, so open, so trusting. Could she risk it? Could she dare to hope that two broken hearts could build something whole again? Nicole lifted her gaze to Benjamin's, finding nothing there but steady, patient love. No demands, no ultimatums, just a quiet willingness to fight for what they had lost. "One day at a time," she whispered. Benjamin's lips curved into the smallest, most genuine smile she had seen in years. "One day at a time," he echoed, and somehow, in the quiet shelter of the rainy night, Nicole felt the first threads of something new, something strong, begin to weave between them. The following evening, the little apartment buzzed with a kind of energy Nicole hadn't felt in years. The scent of baked lasagna filled the air, mingling with garlic bread warming in the oven. Seth sat at the kitchen table, coloring a paper placemat that Benjamin had picked up from the diner down the street. Nicole moved around the kitchen, pulling plates from the cabinets, stealing glances at Benjamin as he helped Seth set the table with all the seriousness of a state occasion. It should have felt awkward, forced. Instead, it felt right. "Forks on the left, right, buddy?" Benjamin asked, crouching beside Seth, who nodded sagely, his tiny brow furrowed in concentration. Nicole smiled despite herself. Dinner had been Benjamin's idea. A quiet evening, no pressure, just the three of them, a small step, a promise that family could be simple and steady, even amid the chaos outside. "Everything smells amazing," Benjamin said as Nicole slid the lasagna onto the table. "Let's hope it tastes as good," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. They sat down together, Benjamin at the head of the table, Nicole on one side, Seth between them. It was a small, wobbly kitchen table, a far cry from the grand dining rooms Benjamin was used to, but he looked like he wouldn't have traded it for the world. Nicole served Seth first, watching Benjamin from under her lashes. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress her. He simply was. Present, real, and more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "Can we say what we're thankful for?" Seth asked suddenly, beaming. Nicole blinked. They usually did that around Thanksgiving, but Seth loved any excuse for a thankful moment. "Of course," she said, brushing his hair back fondly. Seth squeezed his eyes shut dramatically, thinking hard. "I'm thankful for Mommy," he said proudly, "and my bunny, and—" He looked up at Benjamin, grinning shyly, "and Daddy, too." Nicole felt her throat close up. Benjamin reached out, ruffling Seth's hair with a tenderness that stole her breath. "I'm thankful for you too, buddy," he said, his voice rough. Nicole swallowed hard, blinking fast. "And you?" Seth asked, swinging his gaze to Nicole. She smiled, the emotion tightening her chest until it almost hurt. "I'm thankful for both of you," she said, her voice steady despite the lump forming, "and for second chances." Benjamin's eyes met hers across the table, a long, charged moment stretching between them. Second chances. He gave a small nod like a silent vow. They dug into the food after that, the mood lightening. Seth chattered about preschool and Christmas presents, crumbs scattering everywhere. Benjamin listened intently, asking questions that made Seth giggle and squirm with delight. Nicole watched them, her heart swelling with something she didn't dare name yet. Later, after Seth was tucked into bed and the dishes were stacked neatly in the sink, Nicole and Benjamin lingered in the living room. The rain had started again, tapping lightly at the windows. Nicole sat curled up in the armchair, legs tucked under her. Benjamin leaned against the wall across from her, his arms crossed loosely, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "This," he said quietly, "is all I ever wanted." Nicole's heart ached at the simplicity of the statement. Not power, not fortune. This. A home. A son. Her. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words pulled from a place too deep to hide anymore. Benjamin pushed off the wall and came to sit across from her, leaving just enough space so she didn't feel trapped. "So am I," he said, "but I'm more scared of missing this again." Nicole hugged a pillow to her chest, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of her own hope stirring. "One day at a time," she whispered. Benjamin nodded, reaching out carefully, brushing his fingers across the back of her hand in a touch so light it made her shiver. "One day at a time," he echoed, his voice a promise. Outside, the world spun on, cold and unpredictable. Inside, in this tiny, fragile space, something beautiful was beginning to grow. The first true snow of the season fell the next morning, blanketing the city in soft white. It muffled the sounds of traffic, cloaked the sharp corners of buildings, and turned even the busiest streets into something hushed and waiting. Nicole stood at the window, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching the delicate flakes swirl and tumble outside. Behind her, the small apartment was still. Seth was at preschool for the morning, and for once, there was no urgent list of errands, no calls to make, no disasters to avert. Just quiet. And Benjamin. He stood across the room, adjusting his sleeves, tension coiled in his broad shoulders. He was dressed simply today. Dark jeans, a sweater soft enough to be worn in a home that didn't belong to high society, but the gravity of who he was clung to him all the same. Nicole felt it, the sense that something was about to change. She turned slowly, setting the mug down with a soft clink. "You're quiet this morning," she said. Benjamin looked up at her, his expression unreadable for a beat. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped in front of her, his hands flexing slightly at his sides. "I've been thinking," he said, "about Seth, about you, about everything." Nicole held herself still, waiting. "I want to be part of your lives," Benjamin said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "Not just a few hours here and there, not just visits." Nicole's breath caught. "I want to be there when he wakes up scared at night," Benjamin continued, his words picking up momentum, fierce and certain. "I want to be there for preschool drop-offs, scraped knees, bedtime stories. I want—" He broke off for a moment, exhaling roughly. "I want to build a life with both of you." The raw honesty of it knocked the air from her lungs. "You mean move in?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Benjamin shook his head, his gaze locking with hers. "I mean whatever you're ready for," he said. "If that's moving in someday. If that's 1,000 small steps before then, fine. I'll wait, but I need you to know I'm not going anywhere." Nicole blinked fast, her heart pounding against her ribs. "You're offering yourself up? No conditions?" she asked. Benjamin gave a small, crooked smile. "No conditions, no contracts, no negotiations, just me." Nicole wrapped her arms around herself, struggling to breathe past the whirlwind inside her. Could she trust this? Could she trust him? The fear was still there. It might always be. But something stronger rose up alongside it, something fierce and fragile and aching for a second chance. Nicole met his gaze, seeing not the powerful CEO who could bend the city to his will, but the boy who had once whispered dreams into her hair under the stars, the man who was now offering her the only thing he had never offered anyone else, everything. "I need time," she said honestly. "I need to go slow. For Seth. For me." Benjamin nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "I'll go as slow as you need," he said, "but I'm here, I'm staying." Nicole felt her lips tremble into a smile. Small, hopeful. "Okay," she whispered, "one day at a time." Benjamin reached out carefully, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "One day at a time," he promised. And for the first time in years, Nicole let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the future she had once dreamed of wasn't gone. It was just beginning. The headlines hit faster than Benjamin had expected. Whitman heir hiding secret family. Billionaire CEO's holiday scandal exposed. Nicole scrolled through the news on her phone, her stomach twisting into knots despite herself. Photos of her and Seth bundled up together at the winter market splashed across 6 gossip sites framed by breathless speculation. Inside Benjamin's sleek black SUV, the atmosphere was taut, the soft hum of the engine the only sound as they drove through the city. Seth sat in his car seat behind them, humming to himself, blessedly unaware of the growing storm. "I'm sorry," Nicole said quietly, slipping her phone into her bag. "I never wanted this to happen to you." Benjamin glanced over at her, one hand steady on the steering wheel. "You didn't do this," he said firmly. "I did. I should have been more careful. I underestimated how quickly they'd pounce." Nicole studied him. He wasn't angry, not at her. If anything, there was a steely protectiveness in the set of his jaw, the narrowed focus of a man preparing for battle. "This isn't your fight alone," she said, resting a hand lightly on his arm. "We're in this together now." Benjamin's hand relaxed under her touch. "I'll make it right," he said. "I've already made arrangements." Nicole raised an eyebrow. "Arrangements?" He smiled faintly. "You didn't think I'd let you and Seth stay exposed, did you?" She shook her head, a laugh slipping out despite herself. There he was, every inch the man she remembered. Strategic, unapologetic, protective. Benjamin continued, his tone even and businesslike. "I bought a property across the river. Private drive, gated security, 3 acres of land. Enough room for Seth to grow up without flashing cameras in his face." Nicole's heart skipped. "You bought a house?" she breathed. "A home," he corrected gently. For all of us. If you'll have it. Emotion clogged her throat. He hadn't asked her to sign contracts. He hadn't demanded anything in return. He was simply doing what came naturally to him, protecting, providing, building something solid beneath their feet. And for the first time in a long time, Nicole let herself lean into that strength without guilt, without second-guessing her worth. She placed her hand over his, squeezing lightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick. "I'm grateful. Truly." Benjamin's shoulders loosened just a little as he brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles with a soft reverence that made her chest ache. "It's not just about keeping you safe," he said. "It's about giving you the life you deserve." Nicole smiled, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, not because she felt weak, but because she felt cherished. As they turned off the main roads, Benjamin's phone buzzed on the console. He tapped it on speaker without missing a beat. "Elaine," he greeted smoothly. "Sir, the PR team has prepared official statements." Elaine's crisp voice filled the car. "Also, our silent partnerships are holding steady. Whitman Enterprises' shares haven't fluctuated despite the tabloids." Nicole blinked, absorbing the casual way Benjamin spoke about managing not just one company, but a web of influence she could barely comprehend. "Good," Benjamin said. "Schedule a quiet dinner with the legal team, and Elaine, find a private preschool for Seth, one that won't leak to the press." "Already in progress, sir." The call ended, and Benjamin shifted his attention back to Nicole without missing a beat. "You have nothing to worry about," he said. "I've built businesses from the ground up. I've survived boardroom wars and corporate ambushes. Protecting you and Seth? That's not work. That's privilege." Nicole's throat tightened. "I believe you," she said simply. Benjamin smiled then, a real smile, unguarded and full of something deep and devastatingly sincere. They pulled up to a quiet, tree-lined road where a wrought iron gate swung open at the touch of Benjamin's key fob. Beyond it, a stately yet welcoming home rose up, stone, wood, and glass blending into the winter landscape like it had always belonged. Nicole turned to look at him, her heart pounding. "You did all this for us?" she whispered. Benjamin cut the engine, reaching over to cup her face gently in his hand. "I would do anything," he said, "for you." And this time, Nicole didn't argue. She didn't push him away. She simply leaned into his touch, into the truth of it, and let herself believe in the kind of love that didn't weaken or demand, but lifted and protected. The kind of love that could weather any storm. The city's skyline gleamed like 1,000 polished mirrors as Benjamin Whitman's private elevator carried him to the top floors of Whitman Enterprises. His reflection stared back at him, sharp suit, controlled expression, steel in his eyes. But beneath the surface, he was no longer the obedient son Thomas Whitman had molded. He was his own man now. And today, Thomas would learn just how much the ground had shifted. The elevator chimed softly, and Benjamin stepped out into the executive suite. Elaine rose from behind her glass desk, her expression unreadable, but her eyes flickering with something like encouragement. "He's waiting in the boardroom," she said simply. Benjamin nodded, walking past her toward the heavy mahogany doors. He didn't pause, didn't hesitate. He had made his decision the moment he chose Nicole and Seth. He would not be moved. Inside, Thomas Whitman sat at the head of the gleaming conference table, his tailored suit immaculate, his silver hair perfectly combed, the very image of old money, old rules, old expectations. "Benjamin," Thomas said coolly, without rising, "we need to talk." Benjamin closed the door behind him with a soft click and crossed the room, lowering himself into a chair opposite his father. Thomas steepled his fingers, his gaze hard. "You've made quite the mess," he said, "parading around with a woman like her, a child." Benjamin arched an eyebrow, his voice calm and razor-sharp. "A woman who is stronger, kinder, and more loyal than anyone in this building, and a son who deserves better than the legacy you're trying to force down my throat." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Public image is everything, Benjamin. You know this. The board is already uneasy. Investors are whispering." Benjamin leaned back, utterly unbothered. "Let them whisper." Thomas's lips thinned. "You're gambling everything your grandfather built, everything I preserved." Benjamin's smile was slow and lethal. "You assume Whitman Enterprises is the only thing I have," he said softly. "You assume losing this company would be the end of me." Thomas stilled, uncertainty flickering across his face for the first time. Benjamin continued, his voice low and absolute. I own private companies you don't even know exist. Silent partnerships, real estate holdings, tech firms, charities, investments spread across the globe. Whitman Enterprises is just one piece of a much larger empire. He leaned forward, pinning his father with a look that brooked no argument. If you force my hand, I will walk away. And when I do, this company, your precious name, will fall harder than you can imagine. Thomas's mouth opened, then closed again, fury warring with disbelief. Benjamin stood slowly, smoothing his jacket. I will not abandon the people I love to protect a name that means nothing without honor. He turned to leave, then paused, glancing over his shoulder. And if you ever come after Nicole or Seth, directly or indirectly, you'll discover just how ruthlessly I protect what's mine. Without waiting for a reply, Benjamin walked out, the heavy doors swinging shut behind him. The tension rolled off his shoulders the moment he stepped back into the elevator. Elaine caught his eye from her desk, offering the faintest, approving nod. She had always known where his true strength lay, not in bowing to old traditions, but in forging his own path. As the elevator descended, Benjamin pulled out his phone. A single photo illuminated the screen. Nicole laughing under the falling snow, Seth on his shoulders, both of them radiant with life. His future. His family. Unbreakable. He thumbed a message to Nicole. All good. Be home soon. Miss you. Her reply was almost immediate. Can't wait. Seth's building a welcome home fort for you. Benjamin smiled, a real, unguarded smile that no boardroom had ever earned. For the first time in his life, Benjamin Whitman didn't care about being a Whitman. He only cared about being theirs, and he would protect that future, fiercely, completely, without regret. Benjamin's estate sat nestled beyond the city's constant hum, a sanctuary carved into the sprawling countryside. Inside its warm stone walls, life had finally begun to take root. Seth's laughter echoed from the upstairs playroom, the sound carrying down the wide hallways like music. In the kitchen, Nicole stood at the counter arranging a plate of cookies Seth had insisted they bake, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face glowing in the golden light of the late afternoon. Benjamin leaned against the doorway for a moment, simply watching. This life was everything he had fought for, and he would protect it with a ferocity even his enemies hadn't seen coming. Crossing the room, he kissed Nicole's temple softly, breathing her in. She looked up at him, smiling, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You're home early, she said. He slid an arm around her waist, anchoring her against him. Where else would I want to be, he murmured. Nicole's smile deepened, a soft blush warming her cheeks. You look serious, she said, studying him. Benjamin nodded. I've been working on something important. For us. He led her into the sunroom where papers lay spread across the coffee table. Deeds, trust documents, banking portfolios, all bearing his name, and now hers and Seth's. Nicole's eyes widened slightly. Benjamin sat beside her, taking her hands gently in his. I'm restructuring everything, he said. Not just for protection against the media, not just for security against my father or the board, but because you and Seth are my legacy now. He picked up a document, running his thumb over the thick paper. I've moved my silent partnerships into private trusts, ones Seth will inherit. The estate, the businesses, the investments. It's all being positioned so no outside force can touch what belongs to you two. Nicole stared at him, silent, overwhelmed, her heart swelling painfully. You didn't have to, she started. I did, he interrupted gently. Because I'm not just promising you a home, Nicole. I'm promising you safety, freedom, a future no one can take away. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from fear, not from sadness, but from the sheer, breathtaking magnitude of being chosen so completely. I trust you, she whispered, with everything. Benjamin kissed her fingers reverently, sealing the vow between them. There's something else, he said, his voice deepening. I'm creating a new holding company. Whitman will survive or collapse without me. I don't care. But this, he tapped the folder labeled Hawthorne Holdings, this is ours. Our future. You'll be a partner in it, not just in name. Nicole's breath caught. Partner? She echoed. In every way that matters, Benjamin said. Your voice, your insight, your dreams. I'm building a world where you don't just exist beside me, you rise with me. A tear slipped down Nicole's cheek before she could stop it, not because she felt powerless, but because he saw her strength, because he was handing her a crown she didn't have to fight for. Benjamin wiped the tear away with his thumb, his expression unbearably tender. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. "You never will be again." Nicole leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady thud of his heart. "I know," she breathed. Above them, Seth's giggles floated down again, a sweet, joyful reminder of the life they were weaving together. Benjamin tightened his arms around her, grounding her, protecting her. Whatever storms might come, whatever battles they would still have to fight, Benjamin had already decided. There would be no retreat, no surrender, only forward, together. The snow had stopped falling overnight, leaving the world wrapped in a soft, glittering hush. Benjamin stood at the edge of the orchard on the estate's western side, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, watching the sun rise over the frosted trees. This part of the property had been untouched until now. Quiet, secluded, perfect for what he had in mind. Nicole deserved more than just a house to live in. She deserved a place where her spirit could breathe, a place built for her dreams, just as he had built an empire for his own. "Close your eyes," Benjamin said later that morning, when he found her curled up with a book in the library. Nicole laughed softly, setting the book aside. "You and your surprises," she teased, but she obeyed without hesitation, trusting him without question. He guided her outside, his hands steady on her shoulders, careful across the snowy path. Seth trailed after them, a little ball of excitement, bundled in his red coat and blue mittens. "Okay," Benjamin murmured once they reached the crest of the hill. "Open." Nicole blinked into the pale winter sun, then gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Nestled among the trees stood a small stone and glass building, elegant and inviting. Warm light spilled from its wide windows. A garden, though dormant under the snow, sprawled beyond it, carefully planned with winding paths and spaces for flower beds, sculptures, and benches. Her own sanctuary. "For you," Benjamin said quietly, "a place to paint, to dream, to just be." Nicole turned to him, tears already glistening in her eyes. "You did this?" she whispered. He nodded, his voice rough with emotion. "I wanted you to have something that's yours." "Renault," he said, "a place where you can create, grow, breathe." Seth ran ahead, slipping slightly in the snow, and Benjamin chuckled, steadying him with a quick hand. Nicole stepped closer to the studio, running her fingers over the smooth stone. She peered through the tall windows and saw easels, blank canvases, a cozy sitting area with a fireplace, shelves already stocked with paints and brushes. Every detail had been thought of, every corner built with her in mind. She turned back to Benjamin, her heart full to overflowing. "I love it," she said, her voice trembling. She didn't hesitate to say it. She didn't flinch from the enormity of it. She embraced it. She embraced the gift he had given her. Not with suspicion, but with the quiet, joyful certainty of a woman who knew her own worth, and the worth of the man who loved her. Benjamin crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and gathered her into his arms, lifting her off the ground slightly. "I'll spend my life giving you reasons to say that," he murmured against her hair. Nicole buried her face against his chest, smiling through her tears. Nearby, Seth shouted from the garden, "Mommy, Daddy, look, I made a snow angel." Nicole laughed, turning in Benjamin's arms to watch their son throw himself joyfully onto the untouched snow. Her son, their life. Perfect, imperfect, real. She looked up at Benjamin again, her heart brimming with more happiness than she had ever dared hope for. "One day at a time," she whispered. Benjamin's eyes softened, and he bent to kiss her forehead. "Forever," he corrected gently. "One day and forever." And in the shelter of that quiet garden beneath a winter sky streaked with gold, Nicole knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Cherished, protected, loved. Without limits. Without conditions. Without fear. The air inside the estate was filled with the comforting sense of cinnamon, pine, and fresh-baked cookies. The great hall, usually so pristine and still, had transformed into a riot of color and laughter. Benjamin stood back, arms crossed loosely over his chest, watching as Nicole and Seth tangled themselves in twinkling strands of Christmas lights. Seth was giggling uncontrollably, somehow managing to get himself half wrapped in the glowing string, his small hands sticky from sneaking too many sugar cookies. Nicole knelt beside him, laughing, her cheeks flushed with warmth, her sweater dusted in flour from an earlier baking adventure. She looked up and caught Benjamin's gaze across the room, and for a heartbeat, The world seemed to narrow to just the three of them. Home. Not a house filled with priceless art and empty halls. A real home. Seth struggled free of the lights, triumphantly holding up a tangled ball of wire. "Daddy? Help!" Benjamin chuckled and pushed off the wall, crossing the room in a few long strides. "Looks like you started without me," he teased, ruffling Seth's hair as he knelt down. Together, they carefully unwound the knotted mess, Seth chattering excitedly about how he wanted the Christmas tree to touch the sky. Nicole handed Benjamin an ornament, a delicate glass star, and he accepted it with a solemn nod, as if receiving an heirloom. "Where does this one go, buddy?" he asked Seth. Seth pointed decisively to the very top of the towering tree. Benjamin laughed under his breath. "Of course. Only the best spot for the star." He lifted Seth up onto his shoulders effortlessly, steadying him with one hand as the little boy carefully placed the star atop the tree. The room erupted in cheers. Well, mostly Nicole's laughter and Seth's delighted squeals. But it sounded to Benjamin like the kind of applause that mattered more than any boardroom victory ever had. When he set Seth down, Nicole was already stringing more lights around the fireplace mantel, her movements easy and joyful. Benjamin joined her, handing her hooks and stepping back now and then to admire her work. "You're good at this," he murmured, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. Nicole smiled up at him, her eyes sparkling. "I've had practice making holidays special, even when it was just me and Seth." Benjamin's chest tightened. "Not anymore," he said, his voice rough. "You'll never be alone again." Nicole touched his hand briefly, the simple contact speaking volumes. After the tree was fully decorated, ornaments collected from Nicole's old memories mixed with new, shiny ones Benjamin and Seth had picked out, they all collapsed onto the oversized sectional in the living room. Seth fell asleep within minutes, curled up between them with a candy cane still clutched in his sticky little fist. The fire crackled low. Outside, the snow fell in thick, silent curtains. Nicole rested her head against Benjamin's shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "This," she whispered, her voice soft with wonder. "This is all I ever wanted." Benjamin kissed the top of her head. "It's just the beginning," he promised. They sat there in the warm, golden glow, wrapped in blankets and dreams, building traditions not out of obligation, but out of love. Not for show, not for appearances, but because, for the first time in their lives, they were truly a family. And no matter what the world outside demanded, this sacred, fragile new foundation would hold. It would endure, because it was built not on duty or expectation, but on the strongest thing of all, love freely given and love gratefully received. The downtown plaza gleamed under 1,000 strands of twinkling lights. Garlands wrapped every lamppost, and the scent of roasting chestnuts and cinnamon floated through the crisp winter air. It was the night of the annual Christmas tree lighting, an event that drew reporters, business magnates, and local families alike. Benjamin Whitman, once the most private of CEOs, had never cared for public spectacles. But tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't attending for appearances. He was attending to make a statement the world couldn't ignore. Nicole stood beside him near the center of the plaza, bundled in a soft wool coat he'd insisted on buying for her. Gray cashmere lined with silk, chosen because it brought out the warmth of her eyes. Seth tugged excitedly at Benjamin's hand, his cheeks rosy from the cold, pointing at the towering Christmas tree that would soon blaze with lights. Nicole glanced around nervously. The crowd was thick, cameras everywhere. Paparazzi lurked just beyond the official barriers, long lenses trained on the VIP section. "We could still slip away," she murmured, half joking. Benjamin tightened his grip on her hand, his touch steady and sure. "We're not running," he said quietly. "Not from them. Not from anyone." Nicole searched his face, and in his eyes she found only calm certainty. No fear, no shame, only pride. The mayor stepped up to the podium, giving the usual welcome speech. Beside her, a handful of CEOs, city council members, and socialites milled about, exchanging polite nods. And there, standing tall and unflinching, was Benjamin Whitman, holding the hand of a woman the press didn't know how to categorize, and the sun they hadn't seen coming. Nicole felt the first flash of camera bulbs and stiffened instinctively. Benjamin immediately turned toward her, shielding her body subtly with his own. "You belong by my side," he murmured, "just for her. Let them see it." Then he bent slightly, lifting Seth up into his arms so the little boy could see better. Seth squealed with delight, tugging at Benjamin's scarf until he laughed, a rich, open sound that rippled through the nearby crowd. Click, click, click. More cameras, more flashes, more whispers, and Benjamin didn't care. When the tree lit up, thousands of white lights cascading down the massive evergreen, the entire plaza erupted in cheers. Seth clapped and whooped, his excitement infectious. Benjamin kissed the top of his son's head, then shifted Seth to one arm and reached for Nicole's hand again, pulling her close to his side in one seamless, unapologetic motion. Flashbulbs captured it. The billionaire CEO, not with a glamorous actress or a strategic business partner, but with a woman whose smile wasn't polished for cameras, whose love was real and rooted and strong. The next morning, the photo would be everywhere. Whitman family holiday debut. Billionaire CEO embraces fatherhood, love, and new beginnings. But in that moment, Benjamin didn't think about headlines. He thought only about the woman leaning into him, her hand curled trustingly around his arm. The boy laughing against his chest, the life he had almost missed, and the future he would never again take for granted. As the crowd dispersed, Benjamin guided Nicole and Seth back toward the car waiting for them. Nicole glanced up at him, her cheeks still flushed from the cold, and maybe something more. "You really didn't hesitate," she said softly. Benjamin paused, brushing a strand of hair from her face with gloved fingers. "Why would I?" he said simply. "You're my family. You're everything that matters." Nicole blinked hard against the sting of tears. No shame, no fear, only pride, only love. She squeezed his hand as they crossed the plaza together, feeling the solid certainty of him beside her. They hadn't just stepped into the light tonight. They had claimed it, together. The estate was cloaked in peaceful dark flickering in the living room. Nicole slipped her coat from her shoulders, her fingers brushing over the soft fabric Benjamin had insisted she wear. She smiled faintly, thinking of how fiercely he cared for her, how natural it felt now to accept his protection rather than question it. Seth was already fast asleep in Benjamin's arms, his small head tucked against Benjamin's chest, utterly trusting. "I'll take him upstairs," Benjamin murmured. Nicole nodded, watching him carry their son up the sweeping staircase with a tenderness that tightened her throat. When he returned, he found her in the living room, sitting on the rug in front of the fire, her arms wrapped loosely around her knees. She looked up at him as he entered, her face illuminated by the soft, golden light. He crossed the room slowly as if savoring the sight of her there, so at home, so beautifully his. Nicole patted the space beside her. Benjamin sank down next to her, stretching his long legs toward the fire. For a few moments, they simply sat in silence, letting the warmth seep into their skin, the quiet stretch between them comfortable and deep. Nicole turned her head slightly, studying his profile. The strong jawline, the faint crease between his brows that only softened when he looked at her or Seth. "You didn't have to do that tonight," she said softly. "You could have kept us hidden. It would have been safer, easier." Benjamin reached over, capturing her hand in his. He rubbed slow circles against her palm, grounding her. "I didn't want safe," he said. "I wanted the truth. I wanted the world to see what matters to me." Nicole blinked fast, emotion thickening her throat. "You didn't even hesitate," she whispered. Benjamin shifted, cupping her face in his hand, his thumb brushing lightly over her cheekbone. "I've lived a long time choosing power over happiness," he said, his voice low and rough. "I won't make that mistake again. Not when it comes to you, to Seth, to us." Nicole leaned into his touch instinctively, her heart breaking open even wider. She lifted her hand to cover his, pressing his palm more firmly against her skin. "I'm not afraid anymore," she murmured. He smiled, slow, devastating, and so full of love it almost undid her. "Good," he said, "because I'm never letting you go." The moment stretched between them, thick with all the things they had yet to say, all the promises yet to be spoken aloud. Nicole moved first, leaning in, brushing her lips softly over his. Benjamin stilled for half a second, as if holding himself back, making sure this was what she wanted. And then he kissed her. Slowly, deeply. His mouth moved over hers with a reverence that stole her breath, as if she was something precious, something he had waited a lifetime to find. His hand threaded into her hair, half angling her closer, deepening the kiss until the world melted away into nothing but heat and heartbeats and the soft sigh of surrender. When they finally broke apart, Nicole rested her forehead against his, her fingers tangled in the fabric of his shirt. "I love you," she whispered. Benjamin's hand tightened at her waist, pulling her closer, anchoring her to him. "I love you more than I knew was possible," he murmured. The fire crackled beside them, wrapping them in its golden cocoon. Outside, the world spun on with its noise and demands, but here, in this quiet, perfect moment, they had everything they needed. A future built not on fear or ambition, but on something rarer, something real. Nicole closed her eyes, breathing him in, feeling the steady, solid weight of his promise wrapped around her like the safest place she had ever known. And for the first time in forever, she didn't dream of running. She dreamed of staying. The morning after the tree lighting, the estate buzzed quietly with its usual comforting rhythm. Seth's laughter drifting from the upstairs playroom, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the kitchen, and the soft rustle of newspaper pages turning where Benjamin sat in the sunroom. Nicole padded barefoot across the polished floors, drawn by the stillness of the morning light, and by the man who had come to anchor her world. Benjamin looked up as she entered, a soft smile curving his mouth. But there was a tension in his eyes today, a razor-sharp focus she recognized all too well. Something was wrong. She crossed to him, settling beside him on the leather sofa, her hand instinctively resting over his. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Benjamin folded the newspaper and set it aside. His hand found hers again, his thumb stroking over her knuckles absently. "A merger I've been negotiating for months," he said. "One of my competitors caught wind of the headlines about us. He's trying to use it to undermine the deal." Nicole stiffened. "Because of me? Because of the appearance of vulnerability," Benjamin corrected gently. "Not because of anything you've done." Nicole's heart ached, but before she could say a word, Benjamin's voice hardened, low and sure, the voice of a man who had built empires and crushed obstacles before breakfast. "I'll handle it," he said. "No one, no rival, no reporter, uses you or Seth as leverage against me." There was no bravado in his tone, only certainty, a promise wrapped in steel. Nicole squeezed his hand, offering silent support, trusting him in ways she hadn't trusted anyone in years. Benjamin stood, already pulling on his jacket, his movements economical and precise. "I have a meeting downtown," he said. "It won't take long." Nicole rose too, smoothed his lapels with a lingering touch. "Be careful," she said, standing on her toes to kiss his cheek. Benjamin caught her chin in his fingers, tilting her face to his. His mouth brushed hers once, firmly. "I'm always careful," he said. "Especially now that I have everything to lose." He left without another word, his stride purposeful, every inch the CEO who commanded boardrooms and brokered billion-dollar deals without blinking. But this wasn't just business, this was personal. The meeting took place in a sleek, glass-walled tower downtown. Benjamin swept into the boardroom, a storm contained in a dark suit and a sharper mind. Across the table sat Harrison Blackwell, smiling, smug, the kind of man who mistook kindness for weakness. "Benjamin," Harrison drawled, "I'm concerned. The media circus surrounding your new family. It complicates your public profile. Perhaps it's not the right time to proceed with the merger after all." Benjamin didn't smile, didn't blink. Instead, he leaned forward, voice a deadly calm. "My private life is none of your concern. And if you think exploiting my family for leverage is smart business, you're about to learn a very expensive lesson." Harrison's smirk faltered. Benjamin slid a folder across the table. Inside, a detailed breakdown of Harrison's hidden financial vulnerabilities, deals Benjamin's private investigators had uncovered quietly over the past few months. "I suggest," Benjamin said, voice as cold as the winter air outside, "you reconsider your position before your board sees this." Silence. Harrison paled, his hand tightening around his pen. Benjamin stood, adjusting his cuffs with unhurried precision. "I protect what's mine," he said, his voice a low growl, "and I never lose." Without waiting for a response, he turned and strode from the room, his victory already certain. That evening, when Benjamin returned to the estate, the tension in his frame had bled away, replaced by the easy strength Nicole had come to recognize as his true self. Nicole met him at the door, searching his face. "It's done," he said simply, pulling her into his arms. Nicole exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. You fought for us, she whispered against his chest. Always, Benjamin murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. Always. Nicole closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the safety of his embrace. This was the man she loved. Not just the ruthless CEO who conquered boardrooms, but the man who would go to war for her and their son without hesitation. He didn't just promise protection. He lived it, breathed it, built it into every choice, every fight, every sacrifice, and Nicole, secure in her place at his side, embraced it fully, her heart finally, wholly at peace. The estate buzzed with a quiet, steady warmth now. Morning light spilled over polished wood floors. The scent of fresh pine needles from the Christmas tree filled the air. Seth's delighted laughter echoed from upstairs, where he was building a pillow fort in the library. Nicole stood by the tall windows of the sunroom, cradling a mug of tea, watching the winter landscape stretch out before her, white and endless. Benjamin entered the room quietly, his presence filling the space as easily as sunlight. He came to stand behind her, resting his hands on her shoulders, his touch warm and grounding. You look like you're a million miles away, he murmured against her hair. Nicole smiled softly. Just realizing how lucky I am. Benjamin turned her gently in his arms until she was facing him. His eyes searched hers, serious, steady. I don't want you to ever wonder where you stand, he said quietly. Not now. Not ever. Nicole's heart fluttered at the intensity in his voice. He pulled a small box from his pocket, not a ring box, not yet, but something just as meaningful. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold pendant on a fine chain. A simple, elegant design. A circle intertwined with a smaller one inside, crafted from gold and white platinum. Our family, Benjamin said simply. Complete, strong, unbreakable. Nicole pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Benjamin took the necklace from the box, his fingers brushing the hollow of her throat as he fastened it around her neck. I didn't bring you and Seth into my home, he said, his voice deepening. I brought you into my life, my future, my everything. Nicole blinked fast, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion in his gaze. I chose you, he continued. I will always choose you. Every day. Tears slipped down her cheeks and she didn't bother to wipe them away. She leaned into him, wrapping her arms around his waist, feeling his strength and certainty wrap around her just as tightly. You didn't just choose us, she whispered. We chose you too. Benjamin's arms tightened around her, lifting her slightly off her feet as he kissed her. Slow, deep, claiming without urgency because there was no rush anymore. They had already found their forever. From the doorway, Seth's voice piped up, giggling. Benjamin laughed against Nicole's mouth, setting her down gently. Nicole buried her face against his chest, laughing through her tears. It wasn't about the grand gestures anymore. It was about the small ones. The everyday choices. The silent vows written in shared spaces, quiet touches, and unwavering trust. They were already a family, bound not by obligation, but by love. A family built by choice. A family built to last. The house was bathed in soft golden light, and the faint crackle of a fire burning low in the hearth. Outside, snow blanketed the world in pristine white, muffling the night with a peaceful stillness. Inside, time seemed to slow, stretching sweetly between heartbeats. Seth was upstairs, tucked safely into bed, dreaming of Christmas morning and all its wonders. And in the living room, under the soft twinkle of fairy lights, Benjamin and Nicole sat together, wrapped in a cocoon of warmth and quiet joy. Benjamin handed her a glass of wine, settling beside her on the wide couch. He was dressed in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater, sleeves pushed up his forearms, the casualness doing nothing to hide the power that always seemed to radiate from him. Nicole tucked her legs beneath her, her new necklace, a symbol of their family, resting against her heart. For a long moment, they simply sat, watching the fire, feeling the gentle hum of something sacred settling between them. Benjamin set his glass down and turned to her. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, not an engagement ring yet, but something equally deliberate, equally precious. He opened it to reveal a slender band of intertwined gold and platinum designed to mirror the necklace she wore. Timeless, unbreakable. Nicole's breath caught. This isn't a proposal, Benjamin said, his voice rough. That will come, when you're ready, when Seth can carry the ring down the aisle and make a spectacle of it. He smiled slightly, then sobered again. This is my promise, he continued. My vow that no matter what happens, No matter how loud the world gets or how hard the storms hit, you'll never stand alone again. Nicole's throat tightened painfully. She couldn't speak, could only stare at him, her heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. Benjamin slid the ring onto her right hand, over her trembling fingers, sealing the vow between them. "I will protect you," he whispered. "Provide for you, cherish you, honor the life we're building together, one day at a time, every day." Tears slipped down Nicole's cheeks, hot and silent. She reached for him, cradling his face between her hands, her voice trembling with emotion. "And I vow," she said softly, "to trust you, to stand beside you, to believe in the future we're making, even when fear tries to whisper otherwise." Benjamin closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing her words, his hands tightening around her waist. When he opened them again, his gaze burned into hers, unbreakable, unwavering. They kissed then, not out of passion alone, but out of gratitude, out of promise, out of the quiet, indestructible joy of two souls who had been found by fate and had chosen, deliberately, stubbornly, beautifully, to stay. The fire crackled beside them. The snow fell softly beyond the windows, and somewhere upstairs their son dreamed sweet, innocent dreams under a sky full of stars. Tomorrow would bring Christmas morning, laughter, and presents. Tomorrow would bring 1,000 more memories, but tonight belonged to them, to vows made not with crowds or cameras watching, but with only a fire, a promise, and a love strong enough to weather anything the world could throw their way. The days after Christmas passed in a peaceful blur. Laughter filled the estate. Seth's delighted shrieks echoed through the halls as he played with his new toys, and quiet evenings by the fire had become the treasured heartbeats of their new life. But even in the deepest calm, Benjamin never let down his guard completely. Success had taught him many things, chief among them, peace could be fragile, and real love, once found, had to be defended. He was in his private office late one evening, a tumbler of scotch untouched at his side, reviewing the final security reports for the year. His head of security, Martin, stood across from him, his jaw set tight. "We intercepted some movement this morning," Martin said. "Tabloid reporter, Julian Cross. He's been digging into Nicole's past." Benjamin's hands stilled over the folder in front of him. "What kind of digging?" he asked, his butt edged in cold steel. "Nothing major yet. Old acquaintances. An ex-boyfriend from years ago. Cross offered him money for anything that could damage her reputation. Luckily, the man reached out to us instead of taking the deal." Benjamin exhaled slowly, forcing the fury down, locking it behind the same discipline that had built his empire. "And Cross?" he asked. Martin smiled grimly. "Being handled. He'll find his sources have all mysteriously dried up. And if he keeps pushing..." He let the sentence trail off. The implication hung thick in the air. Benjamin nodded once. "Good. Keep the pressure quiet. I want no disruption to Nicole or Seth. I don't want her knowing unless it's necessary. Her world is finally peaceful. She deserves that. I'll deal with the shadows." Martin gave a crisp nod and left. Benjamin turned his chair to the window, looking out over the snow-covered grounds where soft lights illuminated the trees. Nicole and Seth were somewhere inside, safe and laughing, decorating gingerbread houses without a care in the world, because he had made it so, because that was what love demanded, not grand declarations under flashing lights, but the silent, relentless work of guarding what mattered most. He set down the scotch and rose to his feet. As Benjamin Whitman crossed the halls of his home, the man the world knew, the untouchable billionaire, the relentless strategist, disappeared. All that remained was a man fiercely, irrevocably devoted to the two hearts that had given him a reason to fight beyond money, beyond legacy. A man who would burn down the world if it ever threatened them again. The new year dawned cold and bright, sunlight glinting off frozen trees like shards of crystal. Inside the high-rise Whitman Enterprises headquarters, the air was sharper, harder. Something was coming, and everyone could feel it. Benjamin stepped into the boardroom just past noon, dressed in a dark charcoal suit, his expression cool and unyielding. His presence alone shifted the energy in the room. Around the table sat the board members, older men and women with wary eyes, and at the head, Thomas Whitman himself, his face carved into lines of displeasure. The murmurs faded as Benjamin approached, his calm presence swallowing the space. Thomas stood as Benjamin entered, an old habit of posturing for dominance. It didn't work anymore. Benjamin, Thomas said, voice clipped, we need to discuss your situation. Benjamin set his portfolio neatly on the polished table, meeting his father's gaze without flinching. I assume that's why you called this meeting, Benjamin said. Thomas's mouth twisted. The headlines about your family are causing problems, he said, voice laden with disdain. There's a perception now that you're distracted, weak, vulnerable. Benjamin smiled faintly, a dangerous smile that had made competitors back down without a fight. You mistake love for weakness, he said calmly. A mistake you've made your entire life. Thomas's nostrils flared. You're jeopardizing everything the Whitman name stands for. Benjamin's voice dropped to a lethal quiet. I don't care about the Whitman name. A collective ripple of shock moved around the table. Thomas paled but recovered quickly, his voice sharpening to a blade. If you refuse to distance yourself from this woman and her child, you'll be removed as successor. You'll lose your voting shares, your seat at the table. Benjamin's hands were steady as he opened the folder before him. You're mistaken, he said, sliding a document across the table. Effective immediately, I resign from the public-facing operations of Whitman Enterprises. The room gasped. Thomas froze, staring at the paper as if it might dissolve under his gaze. You can't be serious, Thomas said, his voice a harsh rasp. You would throw away your legacy for a woman? Benjamin's laugh was low and full of true amusement. For my family, he corrected. For a life that means something beyond money and boardroom victories. He leaned closer, voice soft and deadly. I control more influence outside these walls than you ever dreamed possible. Whitman Enterprises needed me. I never needed it. He stood then, buttoning his jacket smoothly. Good luck keeping the ship afloat without me, Benjamin said as he turned for the door. Thomas barked after him. You'll regret this. Benjamin paused at the threshold, casting one last glance over his shoulder. I regret only the years I wasted chasing a legacy that was never worthy of my name, he said. Then he walked away, out of the boardroom, out of his father's shadow, and into the blinding light of his new life. The drive home felt lighter somehow, as if the last chains had fallen away. When Benjamin pulled up to the estate, the sun was beginning to set, casting the snow in a warm, golden glow. He found Nicole and Seth outside, bundled against the cold, building a snow fort together. Seth spotted him first, waving a mittened hand frantically. Daddy! Help us! We're under attack, he shouted, giggling. Benjamin laughed, stepping into the snow, letting the cold and the joy and the love of this ordinary perfect moment soak into his skin. Nicole met his gaze across the drift, her smile soft and knowing, as if she felt the shift in him without a word spoken. He crossed to her, cupping her face between his hands, brushing a kiss over her cold lips. It's done, he whispered against her mouth. I chose you. Nicole's breath hitched, tears springing to her eyes. You chose us, she whispered back. He nodded, kissing her again, deeper this time, sealing the vow. No legacy could compare to this. No name, no fortune, no title. This love, this family, this life was the only legacy that ever mattered, and he would defend it with everything he was for as long as he lived. The evening of the Foundation Gala arrived crisp and clear, the stars glittering sharp against a velvet black sky. It was Benjamin's first public appearance since stepping down from Whitman Enterprises. And tonight, Nicole would stand proudly at his side, not hidden, not shielded, but fully, visibly, unquestionably his. In the master suite, Nicole stood before the full-length mirror, smoothing her hands over the deep emerald silk gown Benjamin had surprised her with, a dress that fit her like it had been made for her. Elegant and breathtaking without trying too hard. Her hair was swept into soft waves, a simple diamond pendant resting against her collarbone. She felt beautiful. She felt strong, not because of the gown or the jewelry or even Benjamin's adoration, but because she knew who she was now, and she knew exactly where she belonged. Benjamin stepped into the room behind her, dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, the crisp lines making him look devastatingly powerful and heartbreakingly hers. He paused when he saw her, his dark eyes softening instantly. You're stunning, he said simply, crossing the room to take her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Nicole smiled, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. And you, she teased lightly, look like a man ready to take over the world. He leaned in, brushing his lips against her temple. Not the world, he murmured. just the future I'm building with you." Her heart twisted sweetly at the certainty in his voice. Arm in arm, they descended the grand staircase, Seth waving them off from the doorway in his pajamas. Kara, Nicole's best friend and now trusted confidant, there to babysit for the evening. "You two go be fabulous," Kara called, grinning as Seth bounced excitedly around her. Benjamin opened the car door for Nicole himself, a small, quiet gesture of respect and devotion that made her chest ache with love. As they drove toward the city, the nervous flutter in Nicole's stomach began to build. She wasn't afraid of the crowd. She wasn't afraid of the cameras. She was afraid of what it would feel like to be seen, truly seen. Not just as Benjamin's companion, but as the woman he had chosen over everything else. The gala was already in full swing when they arrived. Photographers crowded the entrance, flashes exploding in a chaotic storm. Benjamin stepped out first, turning back to offer his hand to Nicole with a steady smile. Nicole took it without hesitation. As they walked into the gala together, conversation faltered. Heads turned. Some faces showed curiosity, others, judgment. But none of it mattered, because Benjamin never let go of her hand. Inside, the ballroom glittered under cascading crystal chandeliers. Music floated through the air, soft and sophisticated. Waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Benjamin led her through the room with effortless command, nodding to old associates, exchanging brief greetings, but never letting Nicole feel sidelined or secondary. When they reached the center of the room, the gala organizer approached them, smiling warmly. "Mr. Whitman," she said, "we're honored to have you and your family here tonight." Nicole blinked at the word family and felt something inside her click into place. Benjamin didn't flinch, didn't correct her, only tightened his hand around Nicole's. Later, as speeches began and donors were thanked, Benjamin's name was called to the stage. Nicole watched him walk up there, proud, composed, utterly at ease. But before he spoke, he turned, scanning the crowd, and his gaze found hers instantly. He smiled, not a political smile, not a businessman's smile, a man's smile, a lover's smile, a husband's smile, even if the title hadn't been made official yet. Nicole straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin. She wasn't here because she had clung to his success. She was here because she had stood beside him when it mattered most. And as the room turned to listen to Benjamin Whitman speak about new beginnings, about redefining success, about legacy built on love, not bloodlines, Nicole knew this was her place, not behind him, beside him, always. When Benjamin returned to her side, slipping his hand possessively around her waist, she leaned into him with easy grace. Together they faced the crowd. Together they faced the future. Unbreakable. The soft hum of laughter and the clink of glasses filled the estate that evening, weaving through the halls like music. It wasn't a lavish party. It wasn't for show. It was something far rarer, something real. A housewarming, Benjamin had called it. But to Nicole, it felt more like a homecoming. Friends filled the wide living spaces, close and trusted. Kara, Elaine, Martin, and a few others who had stood by Benjamin and Nicole during the quiet, uncertain days. No press, no flashing cameras, no formalities, just warmth, family, and the golden comfort of belonging. The massive stone fireplace crackled cheerfully, and the scent of rosemary and roasted chicken drifted from the kitchen. Candles flickered on every surface, softening the edges of the grand rooms until they felt more like a cocoon than a castle. Nicole stood at the threshold of the living room for a moment, simply taking it all in. Benjamin was across the room, one hand resting lightly on Seth's shoulder as he knelt to help the boy set up a new toy racetrack someone had brought as a gift. The sight made Nicole's chest ache with happiness. He wasn't playing the role of father and partner for appearances. He lived it, breathed it every minute, every look, every touch. Kara sidled up beside her, bumping her shoulder playfully. "You know," she said under her breath, "he's ruined other men for you, forever." Nicole laughed, blinking back a sudden rush of emotion. "Good," she whispered. "I don't want anyone else." Kara grinned and wandered off to snag a cookie from the dessert table. Nicole crossed the room slowly, savoring the simple perfection of the moment. She knelt beside Benjamin and Seth, smiling as Seth explained the intricacies of his racetrack with solemn importance. Benjamin looked up at her, his eyes lighting with that familiar warmth that still made her knees weak. "Hey, beautiful," he said casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Nicole brushed her hand lightly over his hair, her heart swelling. Having fun? She teased. Seth nodded vigorously. Daddy's helping me build the fastest racetrack ever. Nicole smiled. Daddy! The word rolled so naturally off Seth's tongue now. No hesitation, no fear, just love. Later, after the last guest had departed and Seth was tucked safely into bed, Benjamin and Nicole curled together on the couch, a heavy quilt pulled over them, the fire burning low. Benjamin's arm was draped around her shoulders, his thumb tracing idle circles on her arm. This, Nicole murmured, snuggling closer, is everything I didn't know how to dream about. Benjamin kissed the top of her head, lingering there. It's only the beginning, he whispered. Nicole tilted her head back, meeting his gaze. You really believe that, don't you? She asked softly. I know it, he said simply. We're building something no headline, no scandal, no legacy can touch. She believed him. Because love wasn't built in grand declarations. It was built here, in quiet nights, in small moments, in laughter shared and burdens carried together. Nicole rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, her fingers twining with his. She had spent so long surviving, so long fighting for scraps of safety, but this was thriving. This was home. And as the snow fell gently outside, wrapping the world in white, Nicole finally let herself relax completely, because she was exactly where she was meant to be. Loved, cherished, home at last. The morning sun poured through the estate's wide windows, casting long, golden beams across the kitchen floor where Nicole stood barefoot, sipping her coffee. The world outside was still wrapped in snow, but inside, everything felt vibrant and alive. Benjamin sat at the island, a thick stack of papers in front of him, glasses perched low on his nose as he made notations in the margins. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, and his face softened instantly. Morning, beautiful, he said, setting the papers aside. Nicole crossed to him, sliding easily into his space, letting his arm curl possessively around her waist. What's all this? She asked, nodding at the documents. Benjamin tugged her a little closer, his eyes glinting with something that looked suspiciously like mischief and something deeper. A surprise, he said. The next step. Nicole arched a brow. You do love your surprises. He grinned. Only the good kind. He pushed the papers toward her, watching her carefully as she scanned the header, Whitman Rye's Foundation for Education and Community Development. Nicole blinked, her heart skipping. You're expanding the foundation? She asked. Benjamin nodded, his voice calm, but carrying that familiar edge of fierce determination. I don't want our life to be about walls and protection alone, he said. I want us to build something, give back, leave a legacy we're proud of. Nicole ran her fingertips over the embossed lettering, reverence in her touch. This is incredible, Benjamin, she whispered. But he wasn't finished. He flipped the next page, revealing a legal agreement, one with her name typed cleanly beside his. I want you to be part of it, he said, officially, not just in spirit. Nicole stared at the page, then back at him, her heart thudding heavily against her ribs. You want me to co-run it? Co-run it, co-build it, shape it, Benjamin said. Your compassion, your vision, your strength, they deserve more than a quiet corner. They deserve a seat at the head of the table, beside me. Nicole's throat tightened, not because she doubted her worth, but because she understood the gravity of what he was offering. This wasn't a gift wrapped in ribbons. This was respect, trust, true partnership. You're not doing this for show? She asked softly, needing to hear him say it. Benjamin shook his head, his hand tightening around hers. I'm doing it because I love you, because I trust you, and because I want our future to be built on something bigger than both of us. Nicole blinked back the sudden rush of tears. This man, this life, more than she had dared to dream. She set down her coffee and slid into the stool beside him, picking up the pen without hesitation. I'm in, she said, signing her name with a steady hand. Benjamin watched her, pride shining openly in his gaze. He pulled her close the moment she finished, cradling her face between his hands. You realize, he murmured, his forehead resting against hers, this means you're stuck with me even more now. Nicole laughed, the sound light and full and utterly unburdened. I was already stuck, she teased, wrapping her arms around his neck. This just makes it official. He kissed her then, slow and deep, anchoring her to him with nothing more than sheer, undeniable devotion. And in that sun-drenched kitchen, with papers still fluttering between them, they quietly, irrevocably merged not just their hearts, but their lives, their ambitions, their futures. Together. Always. The first hints of spring had begun to thaw the heavy snows around the estate. Tiny shoots of green pressed against the frosted earth, stubborn and full of promise. Inside, the house thrummed with the quiet rhythm of ordinary life. A life Benjamin and Nicole had fought to build and now protected fiercely. Nicole stood in the master bathroom, clutching a slim plastic stick in her shaking hands. The world had gone absolutely silent. 2 pink lines. Clear, unmistakable, pregnant. She leaned heavily against the counter, her free hand pressed to her still flat belly, as emotions crashed through her. Disbelief, wonder, fear, fierce, aching joy. A life. A piece of Benjamin, a piece of her, a future they hadn't even known they were waiting for. She heard Seth's distant laughter from the playroom, and a moment later, Benjamin's deeper rumble of amusement. The sound steadied her somehow, anchoring her in the flood of feeling. Nicole stared at her reflection, her flushed cheeks, her wide, shining eyes, and a slow, incredulous smile curved her mouth. This wasn't an accident. This was a gift. A quiet knock at the door startled her from her reverie. "Nicole?" Benjamin's voice drifted in, laced with casual affection. "Everything okay?" She stared at the positive test still trembling in her hand. Her heart pounded wildly. "I'm fine," she called back, slipping the test into the pocket of her robe for now. But she wasn't ready to tell him yet. Not here, not now, not in a bathroom with the hum of an electric toothbrush in the background. This deserved something more, something beautiful. Nicole took a steadying breath and opened the door. Benjamin was leaning casually against the hallway wall, barefoot in jeans and a fitted black t-shirt, looking impossibly good and completely at home. He frowned slightly when he saw her face, stepping forward. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, brushing a thumb over her cheek. Nicole smiled up at him, her heart aching with how much she loved him. "I'm better than okay," she whispered. He searched her face for a moment longer, then seemed satisfied, tugging her gently into his arms. "Come on," he said. "Seth's building a family fort in the library. It's serious business. We've been summoned." Nicole laughed, the sound high and bright and full of wonder. Family fort. Family. Their family was about to grow, and he didn't even know it yet. She let him pull her along, tucking the secret against her heart like a precious jewel. She'd tell him soon. When the moment was right, when she could look into his eyes and share the miracle blooming between them. For now, she would hold it close. A quiet, beautiful beginning to the next chapter of their life. A chapter written not in fear or loneliness, but in hope, in joy, in love. And when the time came to tell him, she knew Benjamin would do what he always did, what he had done since the first moment fate had thrown them back into each other's lives. He would embrace it. He would embrace her. And together, they would build a future even bigger than the one they had dared to imagine. The evening air was cool and soft, carrying the scent of budding earth and the faint smoke of the fire Benjamin had lit outside. Fairy lights twinkled through the garden Nicole loved so much, the one Benjamin had built for her with winding stone paths and blooming promises under every leaf. Nicole stood by the French doors leading to the patio, barefoot, a light sweater wrapped around her shoulders. Somehow, she knew tonight was different. The air itself seemed to hum with anticipation. Benjamin appeared behind her, his hands sliding warmly along her arms. "Come with me," he whispered against her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. She turned to him, smiling, letting him lead her outside into the night. Seth was already fast asleep inside, safe and dreaming, leaving the world quiet for just the two of them. Benjamin guided her to the center of the garden where a low table sat beneath the branches of an ancient oak, covered in candles and soft linen. A bottle of champagne chilled in a silver bucket, and 2 glasses waited, one already filled with a sparkling cider for Nicole, just as he had thoughtfully planned. She laughed softly, the sound threading into the night. "You're spoiling me," she said. Benjamin smiled, but there was a gravity in his eyes tonight, a steady, unshakable purpose. "I'll spend the rest of my life doing exactly that," he said. They sat for a moment, sipping their drinks, the silence between them rich and easy. The garden wrapped around them like a living thing, sheltering, blessing, bearing witness. When Nicole set down her glass, Benjamin reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't open it immediately. He simply held it between them, his thumb stroking over the worn fabric. I used to think success was about power, he said quietly, about conquering every boardroom, every market. I chased that life because I thought it would make me untouchable. Nicole reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. You don't have to explain, she whispered. But he shook his head gently. I want to, he said, because meeting you again, finding Seth, building this life with you, it changed everything. He stood then, slow and sure, coming to kneel in front of her on one knee, the candles casting golden halos around them. Nicole pressed trembling fingers to her mouth as Benjamin opened the box, revealing a simple but breathtaking diamond ring, timeless, elegant, utterly her. Tears welled up in Nicole's eyes, spilling over without shame. I want to wake up beside you every morning. I want to laugh with you, build with you, dream with you. I want to watch Seth grow up with both of us standing proudly by his side. And when the storms come, and they will, I want to be the shelter you can always fall into. He smiled then, a smile that shattered her completely. Nicole, he said, voice thick with emotion, will you marry me? Nicole launched herself off the chair, nearly knocking him over as she threw her arms around his neck. Yes, she gasped, laughing through her tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Benjamin caught her, lifting her into his arms effortlessly, spinning her once before setting her down gently on her feet. His hands trembled slightly as he slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit like everything between them. Nicole held up her hand, the diamond catching the light, but her eyes stayed locked on Benjamin. I love you, she whispered fiercely. I love you more, Benjamin murmured, pulling her into a kiss that tasted of salt and laughter and promises made under starlight. Around them, the garden stood silent, bearing witness to the vow spoken not with gold and grandeur, but with hearts laid bare. Two souls found by fate, two lives finally, irrevocably woven into one. Forever. The following days unfolded like a dream Nicole never wanted to wake from. The engagement ring felt like a promise she carried everywhere, a quiet, gleaming reminder that their love wasn't fragile anymore. It was steady, solid, unshakable. They didn't rush into wedding plans. There were no demands for elaborate venues or society spectacles. Instead, Benjamin and Nicole sat at the long kitchen table late at night, after Seth had gone to bed, after the world had gone still, dreaming out loud about the life they wanted to build. I don't want something massive, Nicole said one evening, her bare feet tucked beneath her, wearing one of Benjamin's sweaters that swallowed her whole. I want it to feel real. Us. Benjamin smiled over the rim of his coffee mug. I want whatever makes you feel like the luckiest woman alive, he said simply. Nicole's heart flipped, even now, after everything they had been through. She reached across the table, linking her fingers with his. I already am, she whispered. Plans began to take shape, not just for the wedding, but for their future. Benjamin expanded the foundation they now co-chaired, pouring time and resources into community schools and scholarship funds. Nicole took a quiet, steady leadership role, her natural grace and compassion earning respect wherever she went. Together, they decided to keep their world as private as possible, not out of fear, but because some things were too precious to be put on display. They spent weekends in the garden with Seth, building birdhouses and painting murals on the walls of the outdoor playhouse Benjamin had commissioned as a surprise. Seth, blissfully unaware of the weight his parents had shed, thrived under the warmth of their shared love. His laughter filled the halls now. Their home wasn't just beautiful, it was alive. One evening, as Benjamin tucked Seth into bed, Nicole watched from the doorway, her hand resting over her still secret bump. Soon, they would have even more laughter, even more little footsteps racing down the halls. She wanted to tell him, wanted to share the news in the right moment. Soon, she promised herself. As Benjamin rose from Seth's bedside, he caught her watching and crossed the room, cupping her face between his palms. I can't wait to marry you, he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. Nicole smiled, brushing her fingers along his jawline. I can't wait to be your wife. They kissed there, in the quiet hush of Seth's bedroom, the simple enormity of the moment wrapping around them like a second skin. They weren't just planning a wedding, they were planning a forever. One built on trust, on choice, on the quiet, fierce kind of love that survived storms and scandals and came out stronger. Together, they had learned the truth. Real love isn't something you find, it's something you choose. Day after day, storm after storm, joy after joy. And Benjamin and Nicole, they chose each other. Always. The crisp air of early October wrapped around the estate like a blessing, carrying the scent of turning leaves, ripe apples, and the first hints of wood smoke on the breeze. The gardens were alive with color, deep golds, fiery reds, and soft, burnished oranges painting the landscape. And at the heart of it all, under a sweeping white canopy strung with delicate fairy lights, Benjamin and Nicole were about to say, "I do." Nicole stood inside the sunroom, the early afternoon light glowing over her gown, a simple, stunning silhouette of ivory satin designed to flow comfortably over her slight baby bump. Her hand rested instinctively over her belly, her heart thundering with excitement, not nerves. Today wasn't about spectacle. It was about coming home to each other, in front of the few people who mattered most. Kara, her maid of honor, adjusted the small bouquet in Nicole's hands and grinned. "You look like you belong in a fairy tale," she whispered. Nicole smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "I already found my happy ending," she said softly. Outside, Benjamin waited beneath a simple wooden arch woven with vines and autumn flowers. He wore a classic black suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone in quiet defiance of tradition. But he looked more devastatingly handsome than ever, and completely undone the moment Nicole appeared at the end of the aisle. Seth stood proudly beside Benjamin, clutching the small satin pillow with their rings tied neatly on top, his little chest puffed out with pride, his gap-toothed grin lighting up the entire ceremony. Benjamin's eyes never left Nicole's as she walked toward him, every step slow and sure, every heartbeat echoing between them like a vow. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, steadying them both. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Nicole smiled through the tears she couldn't hold back anymore. "You're my whole world," she breathed. The officiant's words blurred into a gentle hum in the background as Benjamin and Nicole exchanged their vows, spoken not for show, but for each other. "I promise to love you without hesitation," Benjamin said, his hands tightening slightly around hers. "To protect you, to fight for you, to build a life so full of laughter and love that no storm could ever break it." Nicole's voice trembled but never wavered. "I promise to trust you," she said, "to believe in you, to walk beside you through every joy and every challenge, to love you and the life we're building, today, tomorrow, and always." When the officiant finally gave the command, Benjamin didn't hesitate. He kissed her deeply, reverently, the world falling away as their family and closest friends erupted in cheers and applause. Seth whooped, jumping up and down, his excitement contagious. They pulled apart laughing, and Benjamin pressed a hand to her bump in a silent promise to their growing family. Together, hand in hand, they walked back down the aisle into a future bright with hope, warmed by love and unbreakably bound by the life they had chosen. And as the autumn winds stirred the trees around them, their forever truly began. Snow fell softly outside the tall windows of the estate, blanketing the world in white and silver. Inside, the house was alive with warmth, laughter, and the quiet magic of Christmas morning. Nicole sat curled on the living room sofa, a soft plaid blanket tucked around her legs, her newborn daughter sleeping soundly against her chest. Tiny, perfect, and impossibly loved. A miracle wrapped in pink cotton and dreams fulfilled. Seth sat cross-legged near the tree, carefully unwrapping presents, his face lighting up with every new discovery. Benjamin knelt beside him, helping assemble a toy race car track with patience and laughter, his hands sure and strong even in these smallest tasks. Nicole watched them, her heart so full she could hardly breathe. This wasn't the life she had once imagined when she'd been alone, struggling, hoping for something more. This was better. This was the life fate had given her when she dared to hope again. Benjamin glanced up, his eyes finding hers across the room. The look they shared was full of unspoken words, gratitude, awe, the kind of love that wasn't loud or boastful, but steady as the heartbeat of the home they had built together. He rose and crossed the room, leaning down to press a kiss to her temple, careful not to wake the tiny bundle in her arms. "How are my girls?" he murmured. Nicole smiled, shifting slightly so their daughter could snuggle closer. "Perfect," she whispered, Absolutely perfect. Benjamin sat beside her, pulling her gently against his side. His hand rested protectively over the baby's back, and Nicole covered his hand with her own. "You've made me the happiest man alive," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You made me believe in forever again," she whispered back. Across the room, Seth whooped with delight, holding up a new set of paints and brushes Nicole had picked out for him, a quiet nod to the creative little heart he'd inherited from his mother. Nicole laughed softly, the sound pure and free. Benjamin squeezed her hand. "Merry Christmas, my love." "Merry Christmas," she said, blinking back tears, her heart so full she thought it might burst. They sat together in the glow of the tree, wrapped in warmth and family and promises kept. The world outside could rage and change and shift 1,000 times over. But here, inside these walls, inside this love, they had everything they would ever need. Not because they had built it perfectly, but because they had chosen each other. Every day, every storm, every joy, kept by love, and they were only just beginning.